Hi.
There we
Perfect.
go. So before we kick it in gear, I just wanted to remind any folks that are on here from the public, we do have interpreters for Spanish, Portuguese, Mon Khmer, and Arabic. If you're using the Zoom software, there should be a little button that looks like a globe down at the bottom. You can click on that, select the language of your preference, and listen along in that language. I think I'll turn it back over to Susan real quick. We can call the meetings to order and get moving.
Okay, sounds good. Welcome, everybody, to the Revere High School Building Committee meeting number 71. Today is Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025. The time is 5:33 p.m. Linda, if you could call the roll call, please.
Absolutely. Thank you, Susan. I'm going to start with the school committee today, starting with Stacy Bronson Rizzo. Don't see her. Anthony Cagliano.
Here.
Thank you. John Kingston.
Here.
Great. Aisha Milbury Ellis.
Present.
Jacqueline Monteroso.
Present.
Fred Sanella. Absent. And Mayor Keefe.
Here.
Excellent, thank you. Moving forward, we're going to go on to the school building committee. And we're going to start with attendance for Mike Picardi.
Here.
Thank you. Stacy Rizzo. Haven't joined yet. Susan Gravellisi.
Here.
Dr. Kelly.
Here.
Carl Svensson.
Here.
Christopher Bowen.
I'm here.
Rich Viscay. Absent. Don Ciaramella.
Here.
Nick Rystrom had emailed me that he was not going to make it today. Mayor Keefe.
Here.
You. Tom Skorowski.
Here.
John Stamatopoulos.
Yes, ma'am. Here.
Excellent. Anthony Cogliandro. Absent. Don Martelli.
Here.
And Joshua Miranda.
Here.
Thank you. That takes us through roll call. Brian, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Sounds good. So we have the bulk of the time we're going to spend tonight is going to be on agenda item 5. We have a couple of quick items to get through first. First off, you did not receive meeting minutes. That's something, the meeting minutes for the December 18th meeting are going to come with tonight's minutes. We'll approve them next month. I apologize for that. That's just something that fell through the cracks on us. So we're going to go right to agenda item 3 to approve the December invoices. They are on the screen. I'll quickly highlight each and we'll look at the budget. Then we'll move for 3 motions. Standard invoice package, left field, billing to design development. Perkins Eastman with some of their sub-consultants in the middle, getting close to the end of design development, and Consigli down at the bottom, billing for pre-construction services. I know this is not the easiest sheet to read in some of these meetings, but as you can see, we're around the 88% level of completion with design development as far as the OPM contract goes. We're at 78% with the design team, and the only other line that we're billing against here is pre-construction. So we do intend, we'll get into a little more of an update, but we'll be completing the design development phase by the end of next month. And really no new business to note on finances, other than just running these approvals. Are there any questions on invoices before we go to roll call approvals? I don't see any hands. I'm clicking through. If not, we would, going in order here, we'd entertain a motion to approve the left field invoice dated December 31st, 2024 in the amount of $236,224.
Brian, can I just clarify that because this is a joint meeting of the school committee and the school building committee, just to be clear for everybody who might be watching or on the call, that votes are for the school building committee?
Yep, good clarification, Dr. Kelly. Thank you.
Motion to approve, left field invoice for $236,224.
Second.
Motion approved, then someone else seconded it.
Yep, motion by Susan Gravellisi, seconded by Mike Picardi. I will do a roll call for the approval of left field's invoice, starting with Mike Picardi,
Yes.
Susan Gravellisi,
Yes.
Dr. Kelly,
Yes.
Carl Svensson,
Yes.
Christopher Bowen,
Yes.
Don Ciaramella,
Yes.
Mayor Keefe,
Yes.
Tom Skorowski,
Yes.
John Stomatopoulos,
Yes.
Don Martelli,
Yes.
Joshua Miranda.
Yes.
Thank you.
And Linda, can we note that, Rich Viscay joined the meeting just as the slide was put up?
Oh,
And
great.
I vote yes.
Thank you. All right, I will jump back up to Rich Viscay.
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Rich. I will note arrival.
Hey, Linda, just so you know, I'm not on that roll call.
Yeah, Linda, we should include Chris, I think, from here on up.
Yeah, I just realized that
Forgot to
too.
put him in the word file we're using. Yep, sorry, Chris.
Not a
He's on
problem.
the second page, that's why Chris, I keep
No.
forgetting. Going down to last, final but not least, Chris Ciaramella.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the next, motion to improve Perkins Eastman Design Development for December 2024 in the amount of $792,973.89.
Susan, just quick check on that. Since their invoice has three parts, the total is $807,949.67. This, I'm trying to circle it over here.
Oh, okay, sorry about that. I thought we were doing
Nope,
them
no problem.
separately. Okay, let me rephrase that. Motion to approve 3 invoices from Perkins Eastman in the total of $807,949.67.
Second.
Roll call?
Thank you. Roll call, Mike Picardi,
Yes.
Susan Gravellisi,
Yes.
Dr. Kelly,
Yes.
Carl Svensson,
Yes.
Christopher Bowen,
Yes.
Rich Viscay,
Yes.
Don Ciaramella,
Yes.
Mayor Keefe,
Yes.
Tom Skorowski,
Yes.
John Stomatopoulos,
Yes.
Don Martelli,
Yes.
Joshua Miranda,
Yes.
and Chris Ciaramella.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, motion to approve invoice number 24 from Consigli Construction for pre-construction services in the amount of $27,000.
Second.
Roll call?
Okay, roll call, Mike Picardi,
Yes.
Susan Gravellisi,
Yes.
Dr. Kelly,
Yes.
Carl Svensson,
Yes.
Christopher Bowen,
Yes.
Rich Viscay,
Yes.
Don Ciaramella,
Yes.
Mayor Keefe,
Yes.
Tom Skorowski,
Yes.
John Stomatopoulos,
Yes.
Don Martelli,
Yes.
Joshua Miranda,
Yes.
Chris Ciaramella.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're gonna move to a quick agenda item here, agenda item number 4. I'll set this document up a little bit. This is what's on the screen right now is a summary of potential grant and incentive opportunities that was shared to the city and school and the project team from the MSBA. These are all items, one way or the other, that as a team between grant writers at the school, city, and the project team will be looking into further. I know we wanted to highlight it with the committee, but Dr. Kelly, I'm not sure if we want to go into any more depth with any of this, or Mayor Keefe.
Well, sorry, I do have a meeting on Friday morning with the city's grant writer. And we're gonna review these and try to figure out which departments might be the appropriate places to apply for these grants. And I'll just foreshadow for the building committee that we might be reaching out to members to help us. If we can identify some grants that would be beneficial to the city, we might be reaching out to members of the committee to help us with certain grants, depending on what the funding source is, and finding the right people who have the right knowledge and the right connections for that grant funding line.
Great. And Brian, I couldn't hear if you mentioned, but just kind of for everyone, the viewing audience, this is good news because a lot of times, and Brian, you've been through the process, is these grants that may or may not have been eligible for were not reimbursable, or they took out the from the calculation of the MSBA grant, where these now don't seem to have that kind of portion. So
Correct.
ultimately, it would be kind of a win-win. They wouldn't affect the amount of reimbursement from MSBA, and they'd also drop down the cost to the community.
Correct. These would not have any impact on the MSBA grant, which is a nice development. So.
And just for the history of it, it used to be that if a district had an MSBA grant to build a new school and they applied for one of these other grants, and they got it, that amount of grant award would be reduced from the MSBA amount. Now it's going to be in addition to, which is fabulous, as the mayor just said.
I was gonna say, I thought I said that, but maybe my English was different.
Yep. Excellent. So, we're going to move into item 5 here. I'm just going to remind folks, anybody on from the public, that language interpretation is live in Zoom. If Spanish, Portuguese, Mon Khmer, or Arabic are your languages of preference, click on the little globe-shaped button at the bottom and pick your language. We have interpreters live. Very brief update on some general items. So we are in the process of estimating the design development package. We will be in that process through February. We plan to meet next, I believe, let me make sure I say the right date. February 26th is when we will have another joint meeting of the school committee and school building committee. At that meeting, we will be summarizing permitting schedule and cost updates based on the estimating process that's happening now. We're also continuing with permitting. A notice of intent was filed today with the Revere Conservation Commission. That should get the project on the February 5th conservation meeting. That is strictly about phase 1 site demolition work. So as we'll go into it in a little more detail next month, but being that we completed the first step in the state environmental permitting process, we're returning to conservation in February to secure permission to do the site demolition work that we plan to do this spring, summer, and fall. So without further ado, we're going to I'm going to try to make this full screen. This was crashing earlier when I did this, so let's see if it works. I'm going to turn it over to the design team, who's going to bring you through an update on building and site design. We have a lot of slides to cover, and we don't want to shortchange the landscape section, which comes towards the end. So I think the goal is going to be to try to get through these slides and then go through committee members' questions. Certainly doesn't mean you can't speak up, but we've got a good deal of ground to cover here, so that might keep us efficient. Dawn, would you like to take it over?
I would love to. Thank you, Brian. And I will also say that Emmett Gregory from McYoung Kim Landscape Design is with us. So he will do the second portion of the design update. Exciting stuff on the landscape design. So at the end of the architectural presentation, I'll turn it over to Emmett and he'll go through the landscape design. So some of these slides, a lot of them you may have seen before, like years ago. So those who have been with us for quite a while, some of these will look familiar, but we always like to remind everyone when we're doing a design update, we design for each community individually. We look at the context, we look at the community, we look at the history, and all of that will hopefully be apparent throughout the design in parts and pieces. So just reminding you, this was a slide from years ago showing some of the context. You know your community best, but these are some of the images that we found that relate back to Revere. So if you want to go to the next slide, we took sort of the first public beach in America and some of the, Revere Beach and sandcastle design, and it started to build on a concept that began with the anatomy of a wave. And that wave had to do with one, taking this very long building. The sheer size of this building is almost 2 football lengths long, and looking at how we can make it feel less long. And in doing some of that, we've got these waves and the concept of a wave, and it relates back to the wonderful context in Revere along the beachfront. So you can see we sort of took the anatomy of the wave, the concept, and then the final diagram. And that takes us to basically the diagram of the building. We've got the main classroom bar to the south, which is that lowest piece of the building. Brian, if you want to Vanna White me, awesome. And then we have the entry plaza, which is a secondary wave that sort of greets the students, the staff, if they're coming to the front entrance, and also the community as you come to the front of the building. And then we have the heart of the school, that big yellow, I'm sorry, big orange circle is really how you enter different parts of the building. Everyone comes into this main space, and a lot of the community spaces feed off of that heart of the school. So that's always been the concept, even back to our interview when we actually won the project with you guys. So moving from that, I think we go to the site plan next, Brian. Yes. So just to give you a quick, it is really slow on your computer, isn't it? It's kind of heavy with a lot of content and photos. But this is the general site plan. I'm going to leave a lot of this for Emmett to cover. But what I will say is that on the lower right, there's sort of 2 fields that are split by the campus entry directly across from the Wonderland garage for all of you that live in Revere and know this area well off the VFW Parkway. That is the main campus entry. You'll come up from there and circle. If you would do the car loop, like the main entrance. Yeah, Brian, thank you. That's the car loop. The buses peel off before the cars, sort of to the south of that multi-sport field, and they drop in the middle of the classroom bar, if you remember the wave concept with the classroom bar. And then the staff and those that will park either on the surface parking or the under building parking, which I'll get to in a moment, they'll swing around the back of the school and enter from the west, kind of the left side of the site plan. So this is where the building sits on the site. For those of you that know it, this is almost directly above where the Greyhound track used to be. So it's kind of the farthest end, the western end of the site. That's actually the high point. We're trying to, being in a flood zone, we have to raise the building and get it out of the floodplain. So we're trying to build on sort of the high point, but it's a very flat field for the most part. So we are also replicating some wetlands, which is sort of the center of the Greyhound, the old Greyhound track. You can see it. Thank you, Brian. He's pointing to where we're replicating it. That Eastern County ditch is basically an open culvert, an open air ditch that collects stormwater from the city. And on the other side of that, we will be replicating the wetland, and Emmett will talk in greater detail than I will about some of the exciting opportunities over in that area. So this is the general site plan. Again, I'm going to leave most of it to Emmett because it's really exciting to hear from his perspective. So the building itself, if you want to go to the next slide, Brian, I'm going to run through the floor plans quickly. A lot of you, again, that have been here for most of the process and are familiar with the building, not a lot has changed from when you last saw the plans. Some minor things, and I'll point them out. But for the most part, that southern wave, the classroom bar, 4 stories tall. The tallest part of the building is on the south. That has the majority of the classrooms, science rooms, tech spaces, learning spaces, special ed spaces. And just for reference, I'll point out the lighter blue is general classrooms. The purple are special ed. The teal-ish green are science and tech spaces. So you can see they're sort of sprinkled throughout. The yellow is a lot of the shared and community spaces. So if you'd point to the main entrance, Brian, you come in on the east side of the building into that part of the school, which is called the 3-story atrium in this plan. A lot of the spaces feed off of that. So the community spaces. So as we get up in the building, you'll see that. Then we have admin spaces are in red. So where adults mostly occupy offices and spaces and conference rooms, those are in red. Support spaces in brown, and then stairs. So the brown, that's the kitchen and locker rooms that Brian was pointing to. That's under the auditorium. But just so you can kind of give a quick look, I'm not going to go through every space, but we'll point out the curve off the main entrance has main admin, some tech spaces. That's the hospitality. There's the nurse and the community health. On the back side of that, we have a lot of support spaces with the kitchen, servery, and locker rooms that support the gymnasium, which is the big yellow square on the left. So that's gym, ROTC, weight room, and there's some spaces above. So if you want to go, oh, one other thing before we leave this, the learning courtyard is sort of centered between the Western academic wing and the gymnasium. Emmett is going to describe that in detail. It's a very exciting outdoor space for the students in Revere. So that's an exciting space that will connect the students from the building back down to the landscape. And I'll remind everyone, it's the last plan. There is under building parking, but I'll show that last just for the sake of getting through the main part of the building. This is the second floor. That part of the school says open to below. That's like a multi-story, 3-story space, which is really dynamic. Lots of natural light. We have some renderings of it. That's also serves as the, on the lowest level, the 10 through 12 cafeteria. And on this second floor, you can see cafeteria, freshman academy there. There is a separate freshman servery and cafeteria that supports the freshman academy. Speaking of the freshman academy, that western wing that's adjacent to the courtyard on the left.
Hi, nice to meet everybody. You're so sweet.
Hi, thank you for joining us. The freshman academy are the first 2 floors of that academic wing on the left. So that is an isolated part of the building. So those students can have an entryway into the high school and feel like they have ownership of some learning spaces. So those first 2 floors there. The rest of it's general academic. We've got art rooms that feed off of the heart of the school, both on the south side and the east. Thank you, Brian. It's harder than you think to run my slides, isn't it, Brian? And then the performing arts. So this is a lot of art space, both visual and performing. They feed off of that curve. Yeah, thank you, Brian. There's band room, digital music and chorus, theater space that all connect to that auditorium, which is that big square. Yeah, thank you. So that auditorium, main level is off of the second floor. So the community, as they come in, they'll go up the grand stair at the heart of the school and enter the auditorium at the second floor. If you go over to the gym, if you recall, it was on the first floor. We have an open to below here with a walking track, not running, but walking for students who maybe don't want to participate in general PE, but still should participate in physical education. There's a walking track, there's learning spaces, there's junior ROTC, general health classrooms off of the second floor gymnasium. As we go up to the third floor, that heart of the school connects at this level too. Again, 2 stories, you'll see some renderings of that. And at this level, you have sort of the balcony level of the auditorium. You've got some admin and guidance spaces to the left of that. The gym is still volume because we need the height for both basketball and mostly volleyball. We have a lot of those yellow spaces that feed off of the heart of the school. It's the main media commons to the south. Yep. And then we have STEM writing centers. We have college and career. We've got credit, dual enrollment. We have a lot of those spaces that are off the learning commons now that feed off of this heart of the school and really will make it a dynamic space, especially at this third floor. That media commons on the south, Brian, that is actually a two-story space when we go up a floor. I'll show you the second floor of that, but that's the main reading stacks, studying space, access to computers. That's basically what you would think of as a library. Chris Chermella asked earlier, do we not have a library? We absolutely do. We're just calling it a media commons because it serves as more than just books and stacks and tables, but it's actually digital literacy and other access to digital resources. The academic wings are still just stacking. This is the third floor. There's one additional floor if you want to go up one more, Brian. Fourth floor, tallest part of the building. You can see the media commons is that two-story space. Yep, facing south, and then, you know, the last of the academic wings. So with that, we've got underbuilding parking that I mentioned, and here I think there's about 350 some odd spaces and 300 out on the surface parking to give us somewhere around 650. So there's also some, this area is intended to flood in a larger flood scenario, a storm surge. So there are not any occupiable spaces down here. It's storage, stairs, and parking. But it's mostly bermed. You can see what's gray. That's like earth up against it, and it's open air to the west to have access in and out from the far west side of the building. John's asking if there's EV charging under. I don't think so for two reasons. One, it will flood, and that's not a great idea. I think we do have EV charging, but I want to say it's out at the surface parking. You're welcome. All right, next slide. So that's most of the floor plans. If anyone's got questions, feel free to either ask now or hold it till the end. Reminder, you would have seen this years ago. We proposed 3 concepts back when we were looking at materials. This was the preferred concept, ocean and wave. It supports the diagrams that I showed you earlier. Some of the palette that we were starting to look at. If you want to go to the next page, Brian, this is actually the real selected materials on the lower left. Those are the physical materials that were selected with an exterior working group in summer of 2022. So we're talking, you know, 2.5 years ago. We've got a base brick that's an iron spot. It's like a shimmer of a dark brick, intended to hint on some of the, you know, the reflections in the water and or, you know, things you might find in the sand. The next is the field brick. It's not a direct correlation to sand, but it has a nice light look and feel like the sand does. We have some phenolic wood accents, you know, just a nod to driftwood and things that you might find that wash up in the ocean. And lastly, 2 different tones of glass throughout the building that is intended to hint at the look and feel of sea glass. So again, you can see the real materials as photographed in the lower left. So our renderings are not really photorealistic and not really going to represent those perfectly, but we try to do our best and have worked with some of the coloring to try to represent them as best we can. So these are the massing models. You can see on the largest one on the right, the main entry. You can see the curve that's got the performing arts that back up to the auditorium. You can see the 4-story wing, which is the tallest curved piece. That's the classroom bar that we mentioned, the gym, auditorium, and of course the courtyard. So this just gives you kind of, if you were flying over the building when it's built, this is starting to give you a look of what it will start to look like from a massing perspective. If you want to move on to the next, Brian, thank you. Exterior renderings, the main entry. You know, this is meant to be a warm, welcoming space for students, community members, guests, to arrive at the school. This is that loop that Brian kind of circled on the site plan. So cars are intended to queue up, park, you know, let their student off, and then continue along and exit the site. So the glass feeds into the heart of the school. When you come into the heart of the school, you have glass beyond to that courtyard that I mentioned. So it's really a dynamic space that gets eastern light in the morning, western light in the afternoon, and is really intended to blur the lines between the exterior and interior and connecting to the site. What's in front of you, the lowest level's the admin, so they'll have visual connection to anyone that's entering the building. That's a guest and needs to be buzzed in. And above it is the freshman cafeteria, and then of course the music as you head to the right. One of the academic wings kind of comes off the left side of the building. And then you can see in all of these, interior and exterior, you'll see the materials off on the right. So the field brick, base brick, I just went through all of those. You want to go to the next rendering, Brian? This is the flip side of it. I mentioned when you enter the building into the heart of the school, there's glass in front of you that connects to the courtyard. This is that view from the courtyard looking back at the heart of the school. So this is from the west. This is an outdoor learning space. The gymnasium's on the left side of the screen. And one of the classroom bars, the lower 2 floors of the freshman academy, and there's 2 floors above of general academics. You're looking at the heart of the school flanked by gymnasium and academic wing. And again, this courtyard, Emmett will get into a lot of that detail. It's very exciting. So next rendering is the bus entry. So this is on the south. This is kind of the middle piece that enters the heart of the school, kind of flanked by the 2 academic wings that are 4 stories tall. So you enter into here, the lowest level, I want to say it's robotics. And then above, we've got 2 art rooms. And then the 3rd and 4th floors are the media center that I mentioned. That's 2 stories tall. So this is really what's on display from VFW Parkway. We're hoping there are some views out to the ocean in between some of the developed buildings that exist along the beach. But we do think, being the tallest part of the building, this will be kind of a really exciting space, and what anyone who passes by on VFW Parkway will see. The classroom bars, we are still developing some of those openings and refining and working with the design working group. So that elevation will update you probably at the next meeting, but still a little bit of discussion about what that will actually look like. So do we want to move into the interior? Some concept drivers for what the inside of it wants to feel like, the ocean, the waves, we're still bringing that in, some playfulness and discovery for the students. Just some, aboard with our concept drivers. If you want to go to the next one, Brian, we'll look at the inspiration and color palette. Both the ocean and school pride will be off the heart of the school. Sand and pebble fields in the admin. The marsh, I'll get into that on the next slide, but sort of recognizing the local ecosystem with the marshes and the ocean connection, and then sky and discovery with the classrooms and media center. So you'll see all of this play out in the renderings that are to come. If you want to go to the next slide, I'll get into, so the first floor, we will be, this is sort of the color scheme as you move up the 4 stories of the academic wing. So the subtitle and mud flat is what we're calling it, with the blue color scheme. The 2nd floor, the low marsh, the 3rd, the high marsh, and then 4th floor will be the upland, the darkest green. So just sort of connecting the architecture back to the local natural resources and ecosystem, we felt like was a learning opportunity, but also a wayfinding opportunity for the students. So if you want to go to the next slide, Brian, here are the color schemes that are being proposed. Again, the first floor is the blue, the subtitle flat. Like, these are the actual materials. So we've got paint, we've got accent tile and accent flooring for each of the 4 academic wings. And then all the field work is on the left. So we've got, millwork and doors are mostly wood. Lockers will be a light neutral color. There's field paint, also neutral. There's plenty of wall protection in the form of porcelain tile that'll, again, probably match the field paint. I have some examples and you'll see some renderings. And then the flooring, again, sort of a neutral, and then with the accents at each floor. So the students kind of know, oh, yellow in the floor, on the walls, I'm on the 2nd floor. So if you want to move to the next slide, Brian. Speaking of floors, here's a rendering. I want to say this is the 3rd floor. The middle green, kind of the medium green color. So this is one of the breakout spaces, kind of mid academic wing. So there's 2 of these per floor, 4 floors, there's 8 of these. It's a place right outside of the middle stairwell that's breaks up that academic wing into two pieces, so students can travel vertically to get to and from classes. That vision glass kind of in the middle of the screen, Brian, if you want to point that out, that's a teacher planning space. They can have eyes on the street and see students as they're passing by. There's a whiteboard that students or teachers can break out from classrooms, work together, small groups. They can write on the whiteboard. They can move the furniture around. There's a counter and a bench for students to stop, charge up, do a little homework if they need to. There's lockers in other parts of the building, but these are sort of entryways into different classrooms. So that green kind of accent paint at the far right enters into one of the adjacent classrooms. And again, all of these, you will see the materials on the right. This is a typical classroom. You've got the exterior window to the right. You've got the door I just mentioned that goes out to the learning space or the corridor on the left. We've got built-ins with the wood millwork. We have a main teaching wall. We have a secondary teaching wall. You can see there's a sliding whiteboard in the millwork on the left, and there's a whiteboard on the exterior wall on the right. We literally provide 4 teaching walls in every classroom. So all of this furniture is flexible, can be moved when needed to break it out into multi zones within each classroom for different learning opportunities. Next slide. The heart of the school. I talked a lot about this. This will be a really dynamic space, some more wood tones, lots of built-ins, flexible cafeteria space, furniture, both in the form of options, meaning there may be some booths, there may be some high tops, there will be some small tables, some large tables, public tables, like what you see in sort of coffee shops now, where you might sit next to someone you don't necessarily know, but that's not a bad thing. The built-in wooden benches that open up. The left side is the courtyard connection. The right side is where the admin is, and just off the screen is the main entry. So you come in off the main entry, you'll be greeted by this multi-story heart of the school. You'll see through to the learning courtyard. You can see up the main community stair here to the, that is the auditorium entry at the second floor. And then the gym entry is under the RHS. That's just a placeholder. We don't know what will go there. We're talking through graphics and, sort of iconic school opportunities. We're meeting both with students to do that, as well as our own graphics group within Perkins Eastman. So stay tuned for some exciting things throughout the building that will appear from that exercise. No, I think we have one more of the heart of school. Yep. So here's as if you walked in the front door. You can see the built-in booths on the left, those wooden booths. We may have a media wall or a graphic wall on the above that. Then we've got the multi-story glass that feeds through to that outdoor courtyard space. So on a nice day, students can go out and eat. Like I said, Emmett's going to describe that. It will really be a dynamic connection between the indoor outdoor here. And you can see the community stair a little better here. Takes you up to that main pre-function area, but also the freshman academy cafeteria. The maker space is at the top of that. So very much on display, and, exciting things that are being built in there can be showcased. And then also the entry into the auditorium flanks the maker space on either side. Next slide. The Chris Chiramella, the library/media center. This is the 3rd floor entry from that. So right off the heart of the school on the south side, plenty of vision glass connections through. You'll be able to see to the outside. It's basically an open space with low book stacks. So you'll be able to see both students in it, but then also the views to the outside. There'll be, your typical desk where you check out books, but then also flexible furniture. There'll be a classroom at the 2nd floor for teachers to bring students in and teach them within the media center. But it's 2-story, and this is the lowest level. There's also some exciting built-in benches. And this is one of the rooms that has carpet. You can see the tile. We've got some linoleum floor, and then wood stacks and wood accents throughout. Next slide, I think, is from the inside. Yep. So the left-hand side is the exterior glazing. So that faces south. That's where you might see some views. You can see that this farthest piece, this is 2-story. You can see those built-in benches that have views to the corridor that we just saw from the other side on the far right. Yep. And some of the library stacks and books and, places students can set up and research, do homework, and certainly work on projects and have access to technology as well. Next slide. The gym. We have a large, exciting gym, 18,000 square feet. It can be separated by a vinyl divider, a netting, into 2 side courts. It's got a main competition court. It's got bleachers around. We have some natural light coming from the north. And then you can see kind of that bluish band around is the walking track. So those silhouettes of people, or, there's, as I mentioned in the floor plans, that's the walking track. So they'll be able to see down. There'll be protective netting. That's what it shows on the bottom right. But there's protective netting to prevent balls from going up or balls from coming down. So we've done this in previous projects with success. So hoping to do this here as well. It's kind of an exciting feature that we were able to get because 3 sides of the gym actually have learning spaces all around it. The next slide, I think, is another view of the gym from above. So this is the walking track view, and you can see down. You kind of see some of that protective netting. Got obviously wall padding. We've got painted metal rails that, from a safety standpoint, here's where we would look to do student pride, school colors, that sort of thing. So some of the accent paints and maybe some of the coloring in the floor to be determined later with this, what's in the middle and any painting in the maple sports floor may, start to highlight some of the school colors and student pride. Next slide. The auditorium, the other big, large community space. I think we're about 1,000 seats here, 2 stories. We have a balcony that you can see on the 2nd floor. This main floor, you enter from the sides, and you kind of you can enter through the aisles or along the sides. Some of the structure is built this way for acoustic purposes, trying to keep the sound within the space. This view is from standing mid-stage. So we have a stage, we have rigging, we have auditorium lighting, theater lighting. You can just see a hint of a catwalk at the top. So modern day performing space. We went and toured one of our other projects with the group at Boston Arts Academy, and the performing arts team from Revere was able to see some of the opportunities there for performance spaces and how they function and how they're laid out. So this is what's currently being proposed. If you want to go to the next slide, I think you look at it kind of from the side. Yep. So you can see the stage to the right. You can see the main floor. There's 2 aisles and then the balcony with some sort of pop out balcony spaces. And this will be fully accessible. And there's ramps on the right to get you sort of down. And then there's a way to walk directly onto the stage for accessibility from within the space. Next slide. Some logistic, materials and colors, the egress stairs, like your typical, how do you get vertically in a 4-story building? We're planning on neutral porcelain tiles that protect the walls. We've got rubber stair treads and dark blue railings. For the most part, at each landing within the stair, we will highlight the level color. I mentioned previously the blue, yellow, light green, and dark green with the marsh theme, so that as you're going up the stairs and you hit one of the landings, you're like, oh, I'm on the 3rd floor, I'm on the light green. So that's kind of a wayfinding built into the architecture. So most of the egress stairs will have this look and feel. The makerspace, I mentioned previously that it was, this is one thing that did move in the floor plan. It switched with the servery for the freshman cafeteria. Now it's a little more on display right in between the 2 entry points for the auditorium. The hope is that this is really a creative building, learning space where students can get dirty and create things. And you can see the cord rails. You can see it's more of a kind of a raw space. It looks a little bit like a science or art room, but it's intended to have these work tables that are on casters. They can be moved around. It's got 3D printers. It's got laser cutters. It'll have general tools. It'll have a glass operable that will open up to that part of the school. So if larger things are being built, there's an opportunity to move them in and out of the space. And next slide. I think this is one of our last, the art classroom. So again, a lot like the makerspace, but a traditional art room. It's got lots of sinks. It's got an adjacent kiln room. We have a specific ceramics art room, which isn't featured here, but has like a row of wheels, pottery wheels. So a handful of art spaces that will all be used extensively for different types of visual arts. I think that's it. Yeah, that's the end of the architecture. It's a lot. I'm sorry to talk for so long. But what Emmett has to show is just as exciting. So Emmett Gregory with Mick Young Kim, landscape design. I will turn it over to you and then take questions at the end.
Sure. Thank you, Dawn. Yeah, as she mentioned, I'm Emmett Gregory, project manager with Mick Young Kim Design. We're one of the landscape architects on the project. We're a Boston-based landscape architecture firm.
Keep going.
Is that a question?
Sorry.
I'm not sure. Okay, I wasn't sure if that was a question. We do education work, higher education work in Boston and throughout the country, so we're really excited to be a part of this one. One of the first things we do when we take on a landscape design is we think about programming. How can we use the landscape to complement a lot of the incredible things that are going on inside? So the first thing we do is come up with some ideas, which we'll run through here, and then I will highlight in later slides how those ideas have made their way into the landscape. So some things that we think might be appropriate for this landscape are outdoor performance spaces and classrooms. We've got some example images of what those might look like. They're not necessarily these really formal constructed spaces, but they can serve multiple purposes. You know, on an off day, they can be casual hangout spaces, but when needed, they can also hold maybe a small orchestra event or a graduation or a lecture or something like that. Kind of on the opposite end of that spectrum would be study nooks. These are smaller spaces of 3, 5, 7 students, maybe a single student can get away from the hustle and bustle of the interior of the building and maybe find a little space to hang out, listen to music, study, that sort of thing. So, you know, in a lot of these programming ideas, we're trying to serve all types of students, those who might, you know, want those more active spaces and feel more comfortable there, and then also those students who might feel more comfortable in these smaller, quiet, secluded spaces. Next slide. Again, thinking about different opportunities for programming. This is a fairly large site, so I think there's opportunity for some walking loops, exercise trails, especially as you get further away from the building. I'll highlight in a little bit. It starts to feel more wild, and so we can integrate some boardwalks or some softer trails that really feel like you're experiencing nature. We also think there's an opportunity for learning gardens here, an opportunity for students to really get their hands dirty, understand what it means to grow something and then eat it. And so we'd like to partner with some of the programs inside the school around kitchen and service industry, that sort of thing, and use these learning gardens as a teaching moment. Next slide. We also think this could be a place, some of these spaces could be used for fitness zones. On a nice day, you could bring a PE class out here to use some of the outdoor areas for yoga or ping pong. I think it's also an area where it's okay to be a little bit more active. It's okay to let off some steam. So we have designated some of those spaces throughout the campus as well. And then just a nice, simple, flexible lawn that can be used to, on a nice day, sit outside and study or kick a soccer ball or hang out with friends. I think those kind of unprogrammed open spaces are also important. Next slide. Again, thinking about opportunities for learning and engagement where kids can get their hands dirty. We have an idea of a microforest, which if you guys aren't familiar, they've been popping up around the country, and especially we've seen a couple recently in Cambridge where you invite the community in and plant trees at a really small scale. You can see that top right image is right after planting, so that a student themselves could come out here, or a class could come out and plant some of these trees, and then they start to grow very rapidly. And after a couple of years, it starts to look like that image on the bottom left, so that if a student's here for 4 years and is passing through these landscapes every day, they start to see the progression and kind of the growth of the natural world, and can also point to that and say, hey, I did that. And I think that could be a really cool hands-on learning opportunity. And then finally, thinking about restorative spaces, that the life of a high school student can at times be stressful. And I think it's important to provide some of these quieter contemplative spaces for students who might be feeling overwhelmed on a certain day or just need to take a break and reset. So we've identified some areas that are a little bit off of the beaten path that can be quiet and secluded and kind of offer some respite. Next slide. Okay. So those are our ideas in terms of programming. Now you'll see, and we'll walk you through we'll kind of zoom into each of these areas as to how those ideas have made their way into the landscape. So this is the site plan again. Dawn covered it briefly, but we're providing a couple turf fields. One's just a standard soccer field, and then the second is a kind of a flexible multi-use field. In terms of recreation, on the far west side of the site, we also have 5 tennis courts. And then we'll start to zoom in on some of these areas. I'll start with the wetland walk, which is on the top right, and then we'll move kind of from the healing gardens clockwise around the building and end in the courtyard. So we can go ahead and move to the next slide. Perfect. So we'll have the same setup on each of these, where we'll zoom in and show some inspiration images on the right. But this is the wetland walk. As Don mentioned, we are, as a part of the building, removing some wetland. It's wetland by name, but it's really in poor condition. And we will be replacing it in this area north of the Eastern County Ditch. With that wetland replication, I think there's a lot of opportunity to get students out into the landscape, start to experience some of these wilder ecosystems. Don mentioned earlier the coastal transect. So that's obviously a big inspiration for us. This is a coastal site, and we'd like to try to recreate as much as possible some of those ecosystems in this area, and then not only recreate them, but get students out in them through this walking trail. You can see there's a couple locations that we've selected to add boardwalk, where you can get students out over the water or the wetland. I think that could be a really cool opportunity to offer a different vantage point. And then kind of at that bottom left corner there, closest to the building, is a small nature classroom. This will be sized for a classrooms of 20-25 students. And I think on a nice day, they could come out and it could tie in nicely with some of their science classes and use it as a real learning opportunity. This is also, I think, a great place for exercise. This is a nice loop here that could connect into some of the larger loops, excuse me, on campus. Next slide. Okay, so now we are at kind of the northern corner of the building. This is directly adjacent to a lot of the administrative uses, the nurse's office, some of the mental health facilities. So this is the area that we've identified for healing gardens and outdoor classrooms. So some of those quieter contemplative healing spaces. We have a series of these nice meandering pathways, and along that we've sprinkled some garden nooks, which are some of those smaller 2, 3, 4, 5 student spaces, and then a couple lawn areas, which would be nice, which could be used as an outdoor classroom. This is also an area where we might look at a little bit of an elevated planting scheme that could serve as a pollinator garden. Next slide. Okay, so now we are at the main building entry. We saw some really nice renderings from Dawn earlier of what that entry will look like. So this is the face of the school. This is the first thing people see when they arrive. So this is another area where we think might be a little bit of an elevated planting scheme, a really nice paving pattern. And then at the edges, it starts to maybe feel a little bit wild. You can see we've started to kind of vary the edges there, and in some of those spaces, tuck some seating nooks. I think you'll have students waiting on a ride after class or after a sporting event. And so we've provided plenty of seating here for folks who are waiting on a ride or just want to hang out. Next slide. Okay, swinging around to the south side here. This is just west of the bus drop off. I talked about that learning garden. This is the spot where we think that learning garden might make sense. It has a really nice southern exposure, which is good for a garden. And then as we move further west, that's a really low area. So we're thinking that might be a nice spot for a bioretention area that will serve not only some of the stormwater needs on the project, but could also be kind of an interesting landscape feature that students could get up next to and understand what that functions as. Next slide. Okay, now we are around the backside here at the courtyard. As Don mentioned, some of this is elevated above the parking garage below. So everything kind of west of that vertical line and to the north of the page is what we'll say is on grade, and then everything to the right or to the east of that is on structure with parking below, and then is surrounded on 3 sides by building. So I'll run through each of these areas in a little bit more detail and we can talk about them. Next slide. Okay, we've got a little key for you at the top right, but we'll move from right to left through the courtyard. So starting with the outdoor cafe, this is directly adjacent to the cafeteria on the inside, what Dawn and her team are kind of calling the heart of the space. And we really see this area of the courtyard as an extension of that. This is a nice wall of glass, so we'd really like it to feel like part of what's going on interior. There also will be, as you're coming in the front entry, some really nice views through that open cafeteria, heart of the school, out into the courtyard. This is an area where we're thinking we'll have movable seating, where on a nice day, students might come out and have lunch out here. A class could come out and pull some tables and chairs together and hold classes on a nice day. So this is kind of the most active, largest of the spaces in the courtyard. Next slide. As you move west away from the heart of the school, we've started to break down these spaces to feel a little bit smaller. So whereas on the last slide, that might be good for a gathering of 100 or 150, this now starts to break out into spaces where 5 or 10 students might sit and grab lunch or hang out. These are a little bit less formal. You can see that the edges kind of start to wind and feel like sticky almost. So you have these little nooks and crannies that you can kind of tuck into. Next slide. And then we talked about that open lawn and amphitheater space. So this is an area that will serve both functions. I think on an everyday, it will just be an open lawn where you can come out and kick a soccer ball or lay on a blanket. And then when there are times where the school does want to hold an event, we have a couple rows of amphitheater seating that could bring in additional seating and set that up and on the lawn with movable chairs and hold a gathering of 200 or 300 if you'd like to do something like that. So again, we don't want a space that will only get used a couple days a year. In a normal time, the main lawn I think will be really active. And then when you need an amphitheater or a larger outdoor gathering, it could accommodate that as well. Next slide. And then finally, this is the last area before you move off the structure. This is the wildest and maybe the least structured of the areas that we've designed. So this is the spaces that we think the students might be able to let loose a little bit. This is where the ping pong tables show up. This is where you have more casual seating in the form of maybe a lounger like on the top right or a hammock like the bottom right, which I think is a nice transition, kind of moving from the cafeteria. And then as you get further away from the school, it gets a little bit more loose and active. I should note too that in this area, we've tried to keep a lot of the more active uses towards the top side of the page, which is the gymnasium, and then leaving a lot of green space and buffer off of the bottom wing, which is one of the educational wings, so that if you're sitting in one of those classrooms, you're not distracted by any of the activity going on in the courtyard. All right, And then finally, this is the transition from on top of the structure, the second floor, or the main floor of the building down to the existing grade. So in order to make that transition happen accessibly, we've kind of wound this path through a forested area and then placed a couple uses along it. So the fire retention area sits at the bottom at the low point of the site. And then halfway up, we've tucked another kind of informal classroom gathering space, which will get some nice afternoon light and could be nice on a warm day. Next. And I think that does it for the landscape. We'll end here on another view of the site plan. And I think that probably wraps it up for our presentation. Is that right? Do you have anything else, Brian?
Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. I'm hitting page down and there's nothing else.
Okay, we must be done then.
Yep.
Great. I think we
Thank
can
you,
open it up
Emmett.
for questions. Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Dawn. I think we'd like to stick with school building committee and school committee. For anyone else on, we will have public comment, but starting with folks on the committee, comments, questions. I know that was a lot of content.
Can I ask my question?
Manu, I think you'll have to wait till the public comment section. We're gonna ask the committees first. I'll let you know when it's a good time. Is that okay?
That's okay.
Okay, thank you.
And Brian, can I just point one thing out that just for everybody's knowledge, nothing is written in stone. So where we saw like the hammock area, we might decide hammock's not the best idea. Or where we saw the ping pong area, we might decide ping pong is not the best idea. But it's just to give us all ideas of what these different areas could be.
Yeah, thank you, Don. That's a great point.
I do see Jacqueline Montesoro hand up.
Yes, Monterosso.
Sorry.
No worries, it's okay. My question might come at a later point in the planning, but I just want to know how the building committee is thinking about safety and security, especially given so many nooks and crannies and just entrances. So is that something that is being talked about right now? Is it a question I should save, down the road in the planning phase?
I'll kick that off, Dan, or you might want to follow up, but we are in a continuous manner as we go through this talking about security. The design team does have a security consultant on board. We have been meeting with first responders, police, fire. High level, we will have exterior cameras on the site, interior cameras, an advanced security system, a mass notification system that's a flexible system that ties together fire alarm with PA, AV. The building will have zoned lockdown capability. All of that is controlled by a building management system. So there is a very sophisticated security system that is going into it's included in the design development, and we are including in pricing. That's definitely an item though that will continuously get worked on, Jacqueline, over the next as we go through the next 10 to 12 months and finalize the design before we bid it.
Thank you. And then a clarifying
Can I just
question.
can I add two things to that before we go on? One is the building committee has been very cognizant of that, and we've been clear with the designers that when we talk about nooks, that everything needs to still be visible by the adults who are going to be monitoring these areas. So, we want to make sure, we talked about like if there were going to be trees surrounding any of the nooks, that they would have a higher canopy so that adults could see through and see what any kids in the nook are doing, if that makes sense. And then the second thing I just wanted to remind both committees, we've talked about this at both committees, but the school committee recently contracted with a security provider who's auditing security measures in all of our existing schools. And part of the charge that we gave them was to also work with the building committee to look at I'm trying to not get too complicated here, but I'm gonna mess this up. Look at the work that the security consultant that works for the OPM and the designer and all of them, our folks that the school committee just hired are going to be a second set of eyes on that to give us feedback and make sure that we have all of our ducks in a row.
Can I just add one quick thing architecturally? And Brian and Diane did a great job, mostly describing active security features. Diane hinted at some of the passive, which is visual, which is like ways in which we design the building so that you can see without like, just needing cameras, but setting up, I mentioned in the flexible learning, sort of having adult eyes on the corridor throughout the day, and areas again at the admin, eyes on both the heart of the school, but also who's entering the building. We try to use passive security in that we're building in layers of visibility so students can see and be seen. But then also we've done white papers, and Bob Bell is one of the authors of one of our white papers on school security. And one of the biggest things is sort of school pride and pride in being a student at that school and experiential graphics. And that's some of what I hinted at that we're working on both with the Revere students now, but then also our graphics department and building in school pride and things that make the students want to come to school and feel prideful about being at school. So that's another layer. So there's a lot of layers to security, and you may be asking just about active, but we're also thinking about passive and school pride as well, because that all factors into school safety.
Great, thank you so much. And then my last clarifying question is, will this still be a one main point of entry type of building, or like, is there just one main office, or can people come in through other entries?
Do you want me to answer that, Diane, or would you like
Sure.
to? So the main entry where it says drop off right there on the site plan, that is the main entry. That is where students get dropped off. That's where visitors come. The bus entry will be open at arrival and dismissal, and I believe it will be manned with adult supervision, just like arrival and dismissal is now. So those are two access points for students to enter and exit throughout the day. Staff that is parking under the building will have card access to enter up and get into the building from the garage below. That will only be open if we're using it for public, performance in the auditorium. If parking happens under there, that's different than throughout the day. The school day is one access point for any visitors or anyone coming to the school, similar to now, except with the bus drop off being open at arrival and dismissal.
Yeah.
Does that
And I'll
answer
just
your-
add, it's actually even more secure than what we have right now, because right now we have kids in the morning who enter through the main entrance and through the east wing. But both the bus drop off and the main drop off, where parents who are driving their kids will drop their kids off, enter to the same point. So it's not like kids can come in one way and go in this direction, come in another way and go in that direction. They're all entering into that heart of the school where we can have high visibility on both doors. And then both of those entryways are going to have lockout vestibules, so that at any other point during the day, if somebody comes in, they would have to come in that main office entrance, and they would have to speak to somebody in the office before they can actually get access to the building. So
Thank
that's
you.
in there.
I'm looking around for hands here from the committees still. I'm not seeing any other questions from the school building committee or school committee. All right, as a quick reminder, we'll be talking a lot of the boring stuff next month. Boring to some, budget, schedule, permitting progress. We're going to run through either this entire presentation or maybe a slightly shortened version of this with the city council. I believe that's on Monday. And we'll be following up the joint meeting in February with bringing the schedule and financial update. Just as a high level reminder, we're looking to be out there this spring, summer, and fall demolishing the old site, starting construction of this building around the foundations and getting the structure right August, September of this coming year. So we'll go into that in a lot more detail at the next meeting, and I'm gonna see if I can get back to the agenda real quick. And I can't.
Your sixth item was public comment, Brian, if you wanted to go to that.
Yes, so I think yes, if we go to public comment, let's start with folks here. I'm trying to see if Manu is still here.
I see him.
He is.
He's here.
Manu, do you have a question or a comment?
Where did he go? He was just here.
He was just here. He just showed us.
I know. I don't see him anymore.
I
Uh-oh.
see his name.
Maybe
I
he
don't see
clicked.
him.
I wonder if he accidentally clicked leave. Maybe we give him a minute.
Yeah, I'll see if any other members of the public name and address for the meeting minute record. You can either try to speak up or put your hand up if you can do that in Zoom.
There is someone who just, a Jessica Cameron in the chat. She said she has a question, but she's not sure how to.
Sure, Jessica, you want to name and address for the meeting minutes, if you don't mind?
Jessica Cameron of 74 Neponset Street. You could just see the back of my house in some of these. I had a quick question about the Dunn Street access.
Yes.
Is the intention for that road back there to be a service road, kind of emergency egress? I just wonder because the inner part of the Neponset Sagamore neighborhood has virtually no sidewalks. So I'm just concerned if there's through traffic on a daily basis there, that kids walking to and from school, kids playing in the streets, etc., we're going to get into some issues. So I'm just curious what the intention of that road is.
Thank you, Jessica. So the intention is just emergency responder access, maybe some limited maintenance access if needed, but there will be a gate sort of where Dunn Road transitions into the property. It's about where Dunn Road sort of tapers off right now. There'll be a gate here that first responders and school facilities has access to, and we're gonna sort of gate off down here so nobody comes up this road. So this is really just intended for police, fire, first responders, but also I think ultimately is an opportunity for walkers or bikers. So I think it will be open to folks that are walking to the site, through the site, or biking, but the intent is absolutely not to bring staff traffic through here or student traffic, school-related traffic, anything for athletics, anything for the school.
Perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. This was all beautiful. I'm very excited.
You're welcome. Just fishing around for any other public comments. So I would really quick check with our 4 language interpreters, give you a minute to see if anyone in your language rooms has a question. If there is, you're going to have to toggle back to the English room once you have the question so that we can hear it. I'll give you 1 minute and I'm going to see if we can find Manu in the meantime.
I don't see Menu on here anywhere now.
No, he just dropped off. His camera turned off, and then he just dropped off.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Well, now I feel bad.
I know, we all do.
Does anybody know who he is? If he's a student, we can try to reach out to him. Mr. Bowen, I don't know if.
I was on my phone when he was signing on, so I didn't get the name. Do you have the name? I can if you have the name, I can look up and see if I can read it.
Yeah, we could.
Like a student.
Yep, I'll try to look it up. Last call, any questions from the language rooms? If not, any new business from the school committee? School Building Committee, apologies. If not, we would look to, for a motion to adjourn both meetings, one from each.
Motion to adjourn the school building committee meeting?
Second.
Second.
Sounds
And
good.
motion to adjourn from the school committee side.
Second.
Okay. Thank you
Thank you
all.
all.
All right.
Have a great night.
Thank you, everybody.